Welcome back into the Sean podcast. It is I, Big Ush. Feeling a little today because, kind of sick, got a bit of cold. Don't worry, not Rona. But, so if I cough or if I seem a little off, that's what that is. Behind me here is the Cat Daddy. Cat Daddy, what's on your mind?
Ooh, what a good week we had. While watching the first round of the playoffs would have been nice. Instead, we get to recap the first ever Week 18 in the NFL season. And the unpredictable season has come to an end, but something tells me the unpredictability itself is not going to stop. The playoffs are finalized, and if your team did not make the playoffs, don't worry. We got draft stuff to talk about too in a different episode for you.
All right, starting this off Saturday afternoon, I guess. The Chiefs went into Denver to face those Broncos, and the Broncos are singing that sad old song, "If I Only Had a Quarterback," because this game was actually fairly close. They're also singing that song, "Maybe If I Didn't Give Melvin Gordon the Ball So Much," because the tide of this game was turned when Melvin Gordon fumbled the ball in the red zone, and Nick Bolton, it was Melvin Ingram, so Melvin on Melvin crime here. Melvin Ingram made Melvin Gordon fumble the ball. Nick Bolton picked it up, and here's the thing. Drew Lock showed he is not Teddy Bridgewater. He tried to make the tackle. He just was not fast enough, and Nick Bolton went for a touchdown.
He did. I love after the game how Patrick Mahomes was talking with reporters. He was saying something like Nick Bolton almost pulled a Daniel Jones and tripped himself up when he was running to the end zone. I enjoyed that.
Ooh. But
shots at the Giants.
I honestly believe the issue of this game, because they had KC on the ropes, and I believe the issue of this game was you saw multiple times where Drew Lock was overthrowing receivers and just not on the same page with them, not accurate, and it was bad.
But it wasn't awful, Drew Lock. You're right, he was bad, but he wasn't awful, Drew Lock. He still was able to keep them in the game. But,
using his legs, yes.
Yeah, Vic. Yeah, what didn't help things was Vic Fangio choosing to kick a field goal. That's the ultimate sign of defeat.
There's that.
Yeah, that was rough.
there's that. Well, there's the fumble, and then there's the field goal, and then they were in clear need of new management, as they say. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next up, we had the Dallas Cowboys going into Philly. Dallas Cowboys put a whooping on the Eagles, and yes, everybody's talking about, well, the Eagles were playing their backups. I'm going to tell you right now, I saw some players that weren't backups playing for the Eagles. I get that a lot of them were backups, but you come to play. You get paid to play, and you play who's in front of you. And Dallas did its job, at least, by making these dudes look like backups and beating them down. And let's be honest, Dallas had a ton of players out too. So I'm not going to say Dallas wasn't the more talented team on the field. They usually are. But yes, the Eagles squad was overmatched. They looked overmatched, and that's just the way it was.
If there's any chance you have to get a tune-up before the playoffs begin, you take that opportunity, and that's what Dallas was handed. Dallas is handed the tune-up opportunity, so now they're heading into this wild card round. They draw they draw San Francisco, who has a pretty hot defense. You're thinking, do you want Dak Prescott out there coming off a 5-touchdown performance going into the playoffs? Absolutely, that's what you want. You want that momentum. any way you can get it. And I think that was a great way for Dallas to head into the playoffs. So, hey, if there was no risk of injury, they.
Not just that. Not just that. I mean, let's be honest here. This is a division opponent.
Oh, yeah, no mercy.
You know,
No mercy.
like I don't like Philly's strategy here because seeding matters. Philly possibly could have went up to what the seven, no, the 6 seed, maybe the 5 seed.
Oh, but there's a difference between Mike McCarthy, a veteran head coach, and Nick Sirianni, a rookie head coach. Could that be a big difference between the two of them?
It could. No, I agree with you, but you do agree that seeding matters, right? Who you play matters in these playoffs.
It
Dallas
does.
now, by doing this, as a result, they jumped from the 4 seed to the 3 seed, which means if they have to go into Lambeau, which is the scariest place to play in all of these playoffs, in my opinion, that would be the NFC championship game. It's better to go into the conference championship game to go play Lambeau, or maybe even avoid Lambeau altogether and get another home game if someone like the Rams is to be able to trip up Green Bay instead of going there for their divisional round. You know what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely. I definitely think seed matters. And it's not just the number 1 seed. Yeah, your number 1 seed has the advantage of a bye week, and it's the only team in that conference that has a bye week. So that's clearly what you're shooting for. But, your 2 through 5, you can't ignore those because
Right.
it could be the difference between, are you hosting another game in the divisional series, or are you going to travel during the divisional series? Like, the seeding is very important. So if any coaches come in to week 18, and I hope Nick Sirianni didn't think that way. I'm hoping that Nick Sirianni was thinking more of, all right, well, let me get Jalen Hurts fully healthy for the playoffs. I'm hoping that's what he was going for, because if he was thinking, oh, seeding doesn't matter, then I think that's going to be something that could come back and haunt his career in future years.
But people were saying they were sitting offensive linemen and things of that nature. They were sitting defensive players. So you weren't playing this game. You weren't planning to actually play this game.
They wanted a healthy team going into the playoffs. That's
going down
that's
to
all
Tampa,
we can see.
Going down to Tampa instead of going to LA. Fair enough. You want to take your chance with Tom Brady over Matthew Stafford? You go. You be my guest.
Maybe they're thinking, well, this Tampa Bay team's pretty banged up themselves, so maybe we have an opportunity there. Maybe.
Sean.
Keyword was maybe.
Who would you rather take your chances with? Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady.
Matthew Stafford.
All right.
I think I choose Matthew Stafford.
I just want to know.
every time.
Not to mention, I don't care if it's backups or not. It feels good to be the divisional opponent. It feels good, not only just to beat them. They bust these fools' necks.
Hey,
to blow out.
They chose to put these practice squad guys out there. They chose to put their bench players out there. You can't take it. You can't take it easy on them because they chose to play that roster. They chose those starters. Cooper Rush also
put the back.
Yeah.
But when Dallas backups came in, they still couldn't stop scoring.
Nope, and that's the momentum that Dallas needs to carry into the playoffs, because there's been all the talk about Dallas is struggling the offensive side of the ball. Dak Prescott struggling on the offense. Hey, if you need a chance to get right before the playoffs, you take that opportunity.
Not to mention, let's put Cedric Wilson on film. Make the Niners think about that. So now they're like,
he looked good.
So now they're like, all right, we got CeeDee Lamb, we got Amari Cooper, and now we got this other guy. But moving on, we have the Bengals traveling to the Browns in the battle of the backups. And, I mean, the Browns feel good about themselves going into a playoff-less offseason, I guess. They played their hearts out with their backup quarterback in. Apparently Baker's going to be back for next year. Even though apparently Baker wants play calling changed or he wants a trade, so that's going to be interesting. Um, the Bengals pulled the same thing as the Eagles. I don't agree with this. I get wanting to not be injured, but I this is an easy way to go into the playoffs rusty and stale.
That's the risk. It's the risk of the rust heading into the playoffs. You're benching your starters, and that's why we're going to get to in a few minutes. But that's why the Packers had played their starters for at least that first half.
Yes,
At least
yes,
you're
that
not
I agreed
taking
with.
3 weeks off before you get back into game action because practice can only do so much.
Right. But
Cincinnati, maybe it's similar to Nick Sirianni. Maybe it's going to be that error from the young head coach who is going to his first playoff and he's thinking, my guys need a rest. My guys need that chance to
and I get it.
recover.
I get it. It's an 18th game, but you want to know what this reminds me of? And I hope not, because I'm actually. We'll talk about that later with the Bengals. But this reminds me of those Peyton Manning Colt teams that were so good in the regular season that they were always sitting their teams, their players in week 17, and then
Maybe
all of
week
a sudden
16.
yes. And then come playoff time, they were rusty, they were stale, they came out flat, and they didn't get it going till late, or they didn't get it going at all, and they got run over by teams like the Patriots.
Yeah, that's the big risk. It
It
absolutely
wasn't
is.
until it wasn't until Indy was like the 6 seed or no, the 5 seed or whatever, where they're all of a sudden they pick up that momentum. And I'm not saying, but I am saying.
Hey, maybe a different level of pressure is what's needed for some teams to really
Well, you just
kick
need
it
to
into
feel
the
good
right
about
gear.
yourself, going in. That's why the Chiefs, they could. I know they were going for the number one seed, but they didn't have to play their players like they did, but they did. You got going into the postseason with confidence. It does matter.
It does, but changing gears to Cleveland, like, you have to categorize this as a disappointing season for the
It's
Browns,
extremely,
right? I mean, not
extremely.
only did you make the playoffs last year, you actually won a playoff game. Your franchise has some momentum. Baker Mayfield was playing well. You made some good moves in the offseason. You added to the defense and you made it a potentially dangerous group. And there's a lot of optimism heading into the season. And then you had Baker injured. You had the whole thing. Jarvis Landry is injured. OBJ was injured. You had injuries on offense. Chubb, Hunt, everybody's getting injured.
But how much do you think that Baker injury held them back?
Oh,
And
does the injury affect decision making?
and how much do you think? I mean, I'm not gonna say Baker has a point here, but how much do you want to think that the NFL caught up to some of this play calling that they were doing and they didn't adjust well?
Yep, and that's on the head coach. That's on the offensive coordinator. But if they want to say not they, the head coach and coordinator, but if fans want to say, we need to get rid of Baker, we need a new quarterback. Hey, you know what? I know another franchise, the NFC North, that's not too happy with their quarterback. Why don't you guys just swap Cousins for Mayfield? Reunite Cousins with Kevin
There you go.
Stefanski,
There you,
familiar with the system, knows what he needs to do.
if it was only that easy.
If only.
All right, next up, we have Green Bay going to Detroit. Green Bay did play their starters for the first half. Then they brought in the backups for the second half. I don't think the backups looked as that bad at all. I do think that somebody needs to learn to catch the ball, but that's neither here nor there. I also don't understand why the Lions really, really, really didn't want that first overall pick, and they really wanted to beat the Packers. I guess there's something to be said about going into the offseason feeling good that you beat the number one seed in the NFL, but Eh. You tell me, Sean.
I for Dan Campbell, I think it didn't matter who he was playing in Week 18. I think he was playing to win, and I believe it was after the game when he was asked about it. He was saying, "Winning creates winners, and losing creates losers." It's the mentality of going in and we're going to win as many games as we can. So I love the
That's some
mentality. I
that's some
respect the
Herm Edwards
mentality.
logic.
You
That's
know,
straight up some Herm Edwards logic.
he's I mean, what is he telling the city of Detroit? And what is he telling the Detroit franchise? We're
I get
playing
you.
to win every single week, and I love it. Now they finished with what, 3 wins in the season plus a tie. So not the greatest start, but
I
mentally the
just really
attitude's
wanted to
there.
put Hayden Hutchinson to Detroit. I just really
Hey,
wanted to do that.
he still could. He
He's
still
still
could.
good, but it's doubtful.
Yeah. You got to give the Lions a lot of credit in this one. They emptied the playbook for this game. They were using trick plays to score, I think, their first 2 touchdowns.
Yep.
They played hard for Dan Campbell. They lost the number one draft pick, but Dan Campbell doesn't care about draft picks. I mean, granted, they're only falling to number 2, so you just get your second best option at
I will
worst.
say this: Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be a problem.
Man, he looks like a stud.
Going to be a problem.
He's
All right,
looking good. For the
let's
Packers,
talk about your pack.
yeah, this was really a best case scenario for the Packers because you're thinking they already had the number 1 seed locked up.
Right.
It's not as if they had to play the starters for the entire game. So you have the playoff bye locked up. It's going to give players time to rest up from various injuries. You got a good first half of action from your starters, and you're reducing the risk of rust heading into the playoffs. And that's always a good thing because, we're afraid of coming out stale when you have 2 weeks off. You were able to get a better look at Jordan Love in a game that didn't matter.
And he looked much better.
He
looked much, much better.
He looked better than he did against Kansas City earlier in the year. So I agree with he looked better, but if we're looking into the future and we're saying Aaron Rodgers, for whatever reason, is gone from Green Bay next year and we're handing the keys over to Jordan Love, I don't think this performance, in combination with that Kansas City game, gives the Packers franchise or fan base any enthusiasm or excitement heading into that next season. He played better, yes, but I don't think he played as well as you would expect for a first-round draft pick, for a first-round quarterback. We had the opportunity to see Jordan Love try and lead a fourth-quarter comeback. The first attempt failed. It resulted in an interception, but it wasn't his fault. The ball got batted, and it got to the receiver. It got knocked up. It got picked. So that one's not on him. The second opportunity, though.
That was hero ball, though. I know that was hero ball.
I know, but that's on him.
Right, but at the same time,
he overthrew the receiver.
Very few quarterbacks that are gonna do that in that amount of time. Let's be honest.
And he's gonna draw the criticism because who was before him? Aaron Rodgers. Who was before him? Brett Favre. Like there's this close to 30-year period where we have two of the best quarterbacks. Exactly, and that's what's gonna make things a lot worse for Jordan Love because even when he does show improvement, he's always gonna have a higher measuring stick. It's always gonna be, well, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. He's not gonna be able to measure up. And even without the spoiling, does Jordan Love look like he deserved to be a number 1 draft pick last year? I don't think he did.
Have you seen some first-round draft pick performances this year?
You mean from this year's rookies?
Yes.
Well, no, I'm talking like last year. Right, last year's class when he was drafted. Does he look like he deserved to be in the first round? Like we had to go through and redo that first round. Is anybody taking Jordan Love in the first? No.
I mean, he was in the back end of the draft. I didn't think anyone was going to take him, but I thought he was going to be a high second round draft pick. But that's neither here nor there. We'll find out that out when we have to cross that bridge. Next up, in the battle of the was it lame duck quarterback, lame duck coaches?
Battle of the
We
hot
have
seat.
we've got the Bears traveled to Minnesota. Bears are up. They was winning this game, and then Andy Dalton gonna Andy Dalton, and Minnesota came back and they beat them 31-17. Both these head coaches got fired. Is what it is. Um, the Vikings are in way better shape than the Bears. I'll say that. The Vikings need some tweaks on defense, maybe a new offensive coordinator, but they've got some real nice stuff on offense. The Bears are a complete mess. The defense, yes, has pieces, but the offense is in shambles.
Especially that line. That line is horrible. Oh,
And no first round pick.
uh, well, if they use, remember a couple years ago when they traded for Khalil Mack, and
Yep.
they're like, "Well, who's your first round pick this year?" And, and the Bears fans are like, "Well, Khalil Mack's our first round pick." Well, next year they're going to say that Justin Fields is their first round pick because that's who they traded up for.
All right,
But
Just I know we're probably gonna go long on this pod, but I got a question for you because based off of that,
mhm,
I do not agree with trading a first round pick or multiple first round picks for a defensive player. I just don't think you should. A single defensive player is not putting you over the hump to win the Super Bowl.
it's so hard for a defensive player, no matter how talented they are, to make an impact single-handedly on the game like an offensive player such as a quarterback can. So
Or even a left tackle or something. You know, you get what I'm saying? Like,
it's harder for a defense. It's harder to justify multiple firsts for a defensive player. I agree with that absolutely. It's
or
it's a
even
lot
a
to give
wide
up.
receiver, you know, like you can scheme around a singular player on defense. If you scheme against a singular, let's say, wide receiver, that opens Green Bay. You see it. Alan Lazard is a recipient of Devontae Adams. Plain and simple. Everybody else in Kansas City is a recipient of Tyreek Hill.
They definitely benefit from the attention that they receive.
And then there's obviously quarterback or, you know, a stud left tackle. These are ones that I could see trading a first round pick. We saw what Amari Cooper did for Dallas. They traded a first round pick for him, and he automatically transformed the offense because everybody else slotted down. A defensive player. Let's look at what we've seen recently. Khalil Mack,
Jamal Adams.
Jamal Adams.
How's that working out for Seattle?
It's a top 10 pick.
A top 10 pick that's going to be in the Jets' pockets.
Exactly. But you get what I'm saying here. Like, I don't personally believe that you should give up a first round pick or multiple first round picks for a defensive player. I just don't believe you should.
It has to be, I mean, if you're doing it, it has to be a generational, transcendent talent. Like, I could see trading multiple firsts for Aaron Donald.
I guess. But even look at the Rams. What was it, Jalen Ramsey? Yes, they make the playoffs, but I mean, is their defense that dominant that trade is that worth it?
I don't.
He has been really good. I'll say that.
Mhm.
But worth the multiple first round picks that they gave up?
I thought so, but Rams don't care about draft picks. Let's
I
be
know they
real.
don't, but you get what I'm saying here. Well,
Yeah,
for the sake of discussion.
it's hard to justify multiple firsts for a defensive player. It's a very risky move that could very quickly backfire. Now, Khalil Mack's first year in Chicago, he was balling out.
Oh, amazing.
After that, when Fangio left, his productivity dropped off. I don't think he played quite as well or as high a level.
Now,
But back to the game. It's a shame that one of these teams actually won the game because I was really hoping that this game would end in a tie, so both Zimmer and Nagy could end their coaching careers in Chicago and Minnesota, respectively, with a tie, with neither of them getting the win. I think that would have been funny, but
I
one
was happy
team,
Zimmer got the win. I was actually happy. I think Zimmer's
yeah,
a better coach than what's happened. I hope that I hope he goes back to be a defensive coordinator because that's his bread and butter.
yep. And Matt Nagy's not going to have any calls anytime
No,
soon for a head
no,
coaching gig. He's
no,
going to
no.
have to
He
be
better
OC
not.
thing, but we'll talk about that in the next pod a little bit further. But Chicago took a 14 lead in the halftime in this one. Matt Nagy's Chicago career is going to end with his team giving up 21 unanswered points in the second half. In the fourth quarter, that results in a loss, and he is always going to be known for the questionable play calling. I mean,
No.
it was
Well, yes,
terrible play calling. Some of those fourth
but
downs.
you know what else he's going to be known for, right?
What's
Well, how did his best season end?
his best season ended with a playoff loss.
Yeah, how'd that end?
Oh goodness, what happened in that one? Remind me.
With the double doink.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that one you can't really put on him that his kicker
But that's
can't
still.
kick.
Still.
But it's funny, yeah. But this game is going to show he was aggressive on fourth down, which is something that you want to see. Go for it on fourth. You got nothing to lose.
Too little, too late.
But his choices of fourth down plays was horrible. You have 4th and 1 several times. Andy Dalton takes sacks on 2 of those, throws an interception on the third one. You have a fourth and a little bit longer,
Andy Dalton.
resulting
Andy Dalton.
in a sack. And it's like David Montgomery wasn't having a bad day. Was it his best day? No, but you don't trust David Montgomery to pick up a yard for you. Put Khalil Herbert in there. You don't trust him to pick up a yard for you. These are 4th and 1 situations. If they convert one of those, it changes things.
Why not, call a waggle or something?
Anything different, but Andy Dalton didn't help things. He played very ugly second half.
Speaking of poor play calling, we're going to move on to our next game, which is the Washington football team versus the New York Giants.
So we just going to start with our WTF moments? Or...
Why not? Let's go with this. Let's go.
Alrighty. So my WTF moment is, other teams and coaches, week 18, you hold nothing back. We saw Dan Campbell pull out the trick plays. We saw Matt Nagy poorly go for it on fourth downs. You get creative. You try and find ways to score. Try and find ways to be aggressive. And then there's Joe Judge. The same Joe Judge who directly or indirectly referred to the Washington football team as a clown show. And the only clown show here was his play calling, and my WTF moment is... You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Keep going.
So my WTF moment is his play calling, and nothing says giving up quite like running a quarterback sneak up the middle on a 2nd and 11 from your own 2-yard line. Now, not surprisingly, and that's going to be your moment. So my moment is the first attempt of 2nd and 11. You try to pass play. You didn't pick up the yardage. Okay, you don't trust Barkley. You don't trust Booker. You don't trust an end around. You don't trust a quick slants to pick up yards for you. It's like you're really trying to play the field position game when you're on your own 2-yard line. You're going for the quarterback sneak to pick up 2 yards. And after the game, Judge tried to justify the decision by saying, we were backed up and I wanted to get more room. So that was my WTF moment, was the 2nd and 11 call. What's yours?
Well, right after that play, I think it was 3rd and 9.
Because they got the 2 yards. Very important 2 yards.
It was 3rd and 9. What they call? A QB sneak. And I mean... This wasn't your regular QB sneak. This isn't them like a QB draw or maybe he's under center and they pushed it forward to get like 5 yards or something. No, they lined up and like kneel down formation and tried to push the pocket. This was what were you trying to play? I mean, I almost thought they were trying to do a wishbone out there.
So did I. I thought they were going to do something tricky, like, run an option. You got 3 people back there at the quarterback. You can do something very creative. Let's just empty the playbook here, right? Call the fumble Rooski, whatever you need to do to get yards.
So this told you exactly what New York was dealing with. They're no longer dealing with it, but we'll discuss that at a later date. On the other side, the Washington football team, let's be honest. Yeah, they won the game, but they didn't look much better. Ron Rivera is, I don't understand how he's head coach, personally. I know he's well respected, but let's be honest. He's got 8 or 9 losing seasons out of 11 or 12 years in the league. How is this possible? He's his new team. He's a new version of his old teammate. And if people don't understand what I mean by that, his old teammate who was a head coach, Jeff Fisher, another guy who somehow stayed a head coach for years and years in the league, had more losing seasons than winning seasons. Rivera's even worse. I don't get it.
The Washington team didn't look much better. I think the final score ended up being 22-7, but I don't think there were many people who really watched this game, and some networks would have been wise not to televise this one unless you're in the New York or DC area. But what highlights are there besides these WTF moments? I don't think there's any highlights.
No.
$72 man, Kenny Galladay.
Did he get the touchdown? No.
He ends the season with 37 catches, 521 yards, and 0 touchdowns.
Yeah, you get paid. All right, next up, we have the surprise game of the week. The Indianapolis Colts go into Duval County, where they have not won in how long, Sean?
2014.
This is just a weird stat. It's a very weird stat. And it continued. The Jacksonville Jaguars went forward and destroyed. They dominated the Colts in this game.
Mm-hmm.
This is wacky to me. They stifled Jonathan Taylor. I know he still ended with 77 yards on the ground. But, Trevor Lawrence had his best performance. Marvin Jones had a heck of a performance.
The worst thing is the Colts knew what was on the line heading into this game. All they had to do was beat the worst team in football, and they could get into the playoffs. That's the easiest task you can be given. All you gotta do is defeat the worst team in the league, who has the worst roster, who has an interim head coach. All you gotta do is beat them. Hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor 85 times. Do not let Carson Wentz throw the ball.
I didn't understand this game.
The Colts lost a must-win game fighting for a playoff spot to a horrible 2-win team whose fans came to the game dressed as clowns.
And Carson Wentz had his worst game of the year.
But that's been Carson Wentz for the past couple of weeks. I think 3 of his last 4 games have just been bad. And that's who Indianapolis
all that
traded
praise
for.
Everybody was giving him. I don't know if you remember that. I do.
Is it the same praise that Sam Darnold was receiving earlier in the year?
It might be.
Might be. It was short-lived. We saw flashes of the player that Indianapolis had traded for, but did we see the real Carson Wentz? We know that he's got a high ceiling, but that floor can eliminate you from the playoffs. He's making Philadelphia look good with that trade. And they didn't just lose the game. The Jaguars beat them, and they beat them bad. the score ended up being what, 26-11 they managed?
26-11.
And the game wasn't even that close. But
All right.
the Jaguars have reason for optimism. Your season ends with a win. It's no longer 2-win Trevor. Now it's 3-win Trevor, so it doesn't sound quite as
He got
catchy.
2 touchdowns in this game.
Yes, he had. I'd like to say he had his best game as a pro.
I think it's his second best game, actually. I think he had a game against, who was it? Who was the Tennessee? Was it
When they put the Titans.
I think it was Tennessee. He had like a 300-yard game or something like that. It was crazy.
But either way, Trevor Lawrence is ending the season on a really good note, which is extremely important for him heading into the offseason because there's a lot of uncertainty that's going on in Jacksonville, and you're thinking, man, I'm their one draft pick. I haven't played like their one draft pick. You get to upset a division foe, and what makes it sweeter is you eliminate that division foe from the playoffs. Your defense looked really good thanks to Carson Wentz. I think the stat I read showed Jacksonville had 25 total pressures on Indianapolis in this game. They were just constantly in the backfield, and the positive momentum for the Jacksonville defense. And hey, you won, and you still get the number 1 draft pick.
True. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers going into Baltimore in a game that nobody wanted to win. I mean, honestly, let's be honest here. These two teams were fighting the chance to win this game all game long. This is one of the sloppiest games I've seen in a while. Pittsburgh gets the win. I'll be honest with you, I don't care. Don't care.
Yeah, the Ben Roethlisberger farewell tour continues. So good for him. He gets one more playoff game. Emphasis on one. Coming into this game.
What? You don't have him beating the Chiefs?
We'll find out in our next episode. The Steelers had less than a 10% chance of making the playoffs coming into this game. But thanks to the Colts losing, it created the hope that they needed. Steelers got the win in overtime because Baltimore wasn't able to get into field goal range, which makes me think maybe all those Harbaugh decisions earlier in the year to go for 2 instead of getting to overtime, maybe they do have some merit. Maybe he was afraid his offense just wouldn't be able to get in the field goal range, and they would just end up losing anyway. So he decided, hey, if we're going to lose, we're going to lose my way.
You have Justin Tucker. That is weird.
Like,
you can't get into.
You just have to get to midfield and you're in his field goal range. That's all you got to do. But this is another game that they played without Lamar Jackson, and you got to think, if you're the Ravens, even with the slim playoff hopes that you had coming into this game, you've got to be relieved that the season is over and it's finally ended, because you're ending this season on a 6-game losing streak. You had a lot of players injured throughout the year on both sides of the ball, and you had a lot of heartbreakers during the season, and you just need to erase this from your memory. This season just needs to be completely wiped. I don't think making the playoffs for them would have made anything better, because they would have been an obvious one-and-done candidate when it came to the playoffs. They just need to erase this whole season from their memories, come into next year as if 2021 didn't exist.
All right, up next, the Tennessee Titans went to Houston, faced those Texans. Texans gave them Titans all they could handle. All I'm taking from this, and I'm still going to battle you on this one, Davis Mills. Looks like he belongs.
Man, he does. He's...
Oh!
I'm going to concede, because I was not a big Davis Mills fan in the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, toward the end of the season. David Culley, obviously. Not many fans of Davis Mills. And I don't know how. If there's any less talented roster in the NFL after the Jaguars, I think the Texans have to be a close second. But Davis Mills was still able to put up respectable numbers on a bad Texans team to the point where you could make an argument that he was one of the better rookie quarterbacks this year. I think Mac Jones, if you're ranking productivity and how they did this season, Mac Jones would be number one for rookie quarterbacks. And I think Davis Mills would have to be number two.
You can definitely put that in there for number 2 because who else comes close? Zach Wilson?
Far down the list, Trevor Lawrence. Far down the list, Justin Fields. Far down the list, Trey Lance. Barely played, but too early to judge all that. So I think Davis Mills ended up being the second best quarterback, which is kind of funny because I thought, in my opinion, I'm thinking, man, the Texans blew this third round pick because that was their first draft pick. They didn't have a first or a second. Third round was our first one, and they take Davis Mills. And I'm thinking, what are they doing? Apparently, they knew something I didn't. Maybe Nick Caserio's got something going on upstairs.
That being said, Tennessee did do its job and still won the game. You play who's on your schedule, and all. It is hard to win in the NFL, but the Tennessee offense did its job, and they got a W. They've got some reinforcements coming for the playoffs. We'll see how this goes.
Yep, the Titans had to have a second half comeback to win this game. That was a little surprising, but they pulled it off. This Texans defense is actually better than they are on paper.
Next up, we have the Saints traveling to Atlanta to face the Falcons, and Trevor Siemian had to come in. Led the Saints pretty well. Alvin Kamara had one of his best games of the season. Saints pulled this one out. Much ado about nothing because they don't make the playoffs, but they was close. They have another winning season, so there's that. As for the Atlanta, I think Atlanta's in the two. I think Atlanta's one of those limbo teams because they're stuck with Matt Ryan right now, and it's just like, okay, let's get talent and let's see how good we are next year. If we're bad, we'll take one of those quarterbacks. But they can't. They're in the mode where they kind of need to move on from Matt Ryan, but they can't.
A lot of dead money. A lot of dead money would be there. Very tough. I'm going to read for you all the notes I have written for this game. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm done.
Fair enough. Yeah. Moving on. We have the Jets traveling to Buffalo. I'm going to give you my notes for this one. Buffalo beat the Jets.
Oh, this was a game? I didn't realize. Sorry. Buffalo comes away with a 27-10 win, but the score doesn't really tell you how close the game was because at one point in the fourth quarter, the Jets were only trailing by 3 or 13-10. And
then Buffalo turned it on and they were like, all right, bye-bye.
Yep, they win the AFC East for the second consecutive season. And that's it.
All right, next up, probably the second game of the week. We had the Niners against the Rams. This game went into OT. The Niners came out victorious. The Niners could be a problem, and the Rams could have some issues. I mean, the stars came out in this one, but I worry about the Rams, especially like Matthew Stafford just does not look like the guy.
The Rams win the NFC West not because they took care of business against the Niners, only because Arizona had lost themselves.
Right.
This was a really good game. The Rams got out to an early lead, and you thought it was going to be smooth sailing for them. Then the 49ers mount the second half comeback, and it makes you think
17-0.
The Rams can't do anything to stop them. Then the 49ers let the Rams back in the game. You're pretty much thinking, oh, great. Well, San Fran is just handing it to the Rams. And you're thinking, Sean McVay is finally going to be able to beat Kyle Shanahan, only for Jimmy Garoppolo. That's right. Jimmy G to lead San Fran on a scoring drive to tie it up with less than a minute remaining. And you'll probably look at this game and you'll think, well, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play too bad. He played a really good game. But I need you to stop that process, that mindset, because his playmakers did all the work for him. It wasn't as if he did it. His playmakers did the work for him. You head to overtime. San Fran kicks a field goal, and all you need now is go down, get a field goal. You can extend the game, get a touchdown, you win. And then we saw Matthew Stafford doing Matthew Stafford things. He made some big plays, and you love to see it. Some great throws. And then you see him just horribly underthrow a ball to OBJ.
He didn't even have to throw it. It wasn't necessary.
But the mentality is the big play mentality. I gotta throw it. I got the arm to do it. His arm didn't get him there. It felt like 6 yards short. Not as bad, but it was a underthrown ball that San Francisco was able to come down with, and that just sealed the game. And San Fran's defense, and their playmakers on offense, regardless of who's at quarterback, is going to make them dangerous in the playoffs, because this San Francisco brought the heat all day long. You think they did this against the Rams offensive line, and the Rams are supposed to have one of the better offensive lines in the league, and you're just bringing pressure after pressure onto Stafford. And I think there was one point in the fourth quarter where he took 2 sacks and threw an interception in the fourth quarter alone. And then you get him rattled. He makes some poor throws, makes bad decisions. And then we saw Cam Akers return for the Rams, which was nice until Trey Greenlaw sent them to Suplex City.
All right. Next up, we have a meaningless game. The Patriots went into Miami, faced the Dolphins. Patriots tried to win this game, but Miami came to play, which will make something that we're discussing in our next segment kind of off. But Miami played really well. This game. Wait, you don't think Miami played well?
No, sorry, that reaction was to the thing you said before. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
All right. Patriots tried to mount a comeback, but Miami took them down. Some momentum going into the offseason, so we thought. But like we said, we'll discuss that later. You got any thoughts on this one before I move on to the next one?
Miami is just a second half team. If they could just forget the first half of the schedule and only play the second half of their schedule, they would be so well. But that's been over the past couple of years with Brian Flores. It's been second half. They really turned it on. They finished strong. It's just how they begin is a little bit slow. And this game, Miami gets off to a really good start. Waddle is able to set a new rookie record with receptions on their first possession, ends it with a touchdown. Shortly after that, the Dolphins defense gets a pick 6 on Mac Jones. New England claws back into this, bringing it to a 27-24 game late in the fourth, but then Miami gets another defensive touchdown in the final play when all the end of game, I got to go 98 yards, shenanigans, 3 seconds happens. Mac Jones needs to play better. If they want a chance, I know, but if they want a chance or an opportunity to advance in the playoffs, Mac Jones has to play better, because you can't rely on the running game the whole time. Mac Jones is going to have to throw.
Well, we'll see. They got Buffalo.
You're right. They can win by running the ball.
Up next, we got Seattle traveling to the desert to face Arizona, and the Rashad Penny resurgence tour continues. Rush for 23 rushes for 190 yards and a touchdown. Arizona got beat by the Seattle Seahawks 38-30.
Seattle is finally able to see what a healthy Rashad Penny can do. And all they had to do was wait 4 years from recovering through various injuries and a combination of poor and underwhelming defenses over the final few weeks of the season. That's all they needed. And what's going to be funny is Rashad Penny is going to enter into free agency. Is Pete Carroll going to sign him back? Is he going to say, we got this pick right 4 years ago. We got the right guy. It just took him a while to develop and get healthy. We got our guy, and it's going to be crazy if Pete Carroll re-signs him to any sort of large deal, because he's not going to be worth it. Who did he run well against? An Arizona defense that's been underwhelming. He did it against the Texans. Who else did he run wild on?
Somebody else.
They weren't the best defenses in the league, so popping up 100 yards really isn't that. Yeah, it's not that significant of a feat. So yeah, he had a great stretch to end the season. And for you fantasy football players, he probably won you a championship if you were able to get him on your roster toward the end of the season.
Well, we got two teams playing each other next week in Arizona and LA, who came off some underwhelming performances in Week 18. So something's got to give there.
We're either going to see a really high-scoring game, or we're going to see something ridiculously low, where it's like a 6-3 game.
All right, next up, we have the Panthers traveling to Tampa to face the Buccaneers. And Tom Brady had get-right game.
He did.
Bucs won 41-17.
I don't know. There's something about the NFC South quarterbacks throwing for over 5,000 yards in the season, because in history it's been done 13 times. 7 of those times have been completed by NFC South quarterbacks. Drew Brees did it 5 times, Jameis Winston did it once, and now Tom Brady's done it 1 time. So the NFC South has 7 of the 13 times that a quarterback has thrown for more than 5,000 yards in the season. Ridiculous. Nope, not in the South.
All right, lastly, we had the best for last. The Chargers went into Las Vegas, faced those Raiders. And this is the weirdest, wackiest game that I've ever witnessed.
And best.
This game shouldn't have went to overtime. I have no clue how it went to overtime. But with 10 seconds left on, what was it, the 23-yard line, Justin Fields gets a touchdown.
Herbert, yeah.
Send this to overtime. And then in overtime, we get 2 field goals. And everyone who's hoping for the tie, everyone outside of Pittsburgh who's hoping for the tie, everyone who wants the tie because they want to see both these teams in the playoffs, got their hearts broken because Josh Jacobs. He had a hell of a running game in this game, and his final run put the Raiders in position for that final field goal, which Daniel Carlson put right down the middle. That's all she wrote, folks.
This was probably one of the more exciting and entertaining games of the year. It was a good game played between the two teams, but what made it even better, what took it up to a whole different level, was the playoffs were at stake. The winner gets into the playoffs. So much drama surrounding that. However, the improbability of, if these two teams tie, they both get into the playoffs. They bounce the Steelers. So when Los Angeles has that second and that fourth quarter comeback, and they're down, what was it, 29-14? It's a 15-point game, and you have Justin Herbert completing 4th and 21, and I think he completed 6 fourth downs on his own to lead this improbable comeback against the Raiders. Then they force overtime, and you're exchanging field goals, and the clock is winding down. And now it's sudden death, and Oakland has the ball just beyond midfield. And you're thinking, man, this game is really going to end in a tie. They're really just going to run the clock. They're just going to get out of the game without injury. You're thinking it's going to happen. They're going to screw Ben Roethlisberger out of the playoffs, and it's going to be fantastic. And then Brandon Staley has to go and call a timeout. And his reason for the timeout was we knew they were going to run the ball. We wanted our best 11 run defenders on the field.
Well, they weren't.
And I'm thinking, I got the logic, but your run defense has been horrible all season long. So there wasn't much of an advantage for calling that timeout to get different people on the field because you weren't stopping the run anyways. And I'm thinking, if anything, you just gave the Raiders an opportunity to give Josh Jacobs a breather.
Yep.
And you gave Rich Bisaccia a chance to come up with a better play instead of, what would have been the original. Because I think the Raiders were lined up in shotgun. So who knows what kind of run play that was going to look like. You gave them a chance to draw up a completely different play. I don't know if I agree with the timeout at that point, but he had his reasons. The Raiders converted. They kicked a field goal as time expired. I was really hoping that they would just go wide left.
But it didn't.
No, that was such a good game.
Now the playoffs are set. That's all she wrote for week 18. I know we went a little long this week, but that's all she wrote for now. We'll give you our words of wisdom in our next episode. Adios, folks.